Guys, today, the Caitlyn Clark stimulus package just got approved by Congress today. It's fitting that last time a new CBA deal was reached
In the sprawling, multi-billion-dollar ecosystem of international sports commerce, perhaps the most powerful narrative a labor union can sell to the public is the idea of shared corporate worth. Whenever a major cash surge lands inside a league office, union leadership is quick to step forward, claim the spotlight, and frame the moment as proof that collective effort and unified labor created the windfall. Yet, when you peel back the polished headlines, set aside the celebratory press conferences, and study the raw financial ledgers themselves, a far less sentimental truth begins to surface. Revenue in elite entertainment markets is rarely produced evenly. In fact, in most star-driven industries, the overwhelming majority of economic value flows from a microscopic percentage of top-tier talent. At this very moment, the WNBA Players Association is publicly celebrating a landmark financial breakthrough as validation of its long-term bargaining strategy. But critics argue that this milestone was not the predictable outcome of steady, league-wide growth. Instead, they suggest it was sparked by a once-in-a-generation surge in attention, an unpredictable catalyst that radically altered the revenue trajectory almost overnight. What we are watching unfold is a debate over attribution. Whether the financial boom belongs to systemic union planning or to the gravitational pull of a singular superstar whose cultural momentum ignited unprecedented demand. To fully grasp the scale of the controversy, it is essential to revisit the league's 2020 collective bargaining agreement. That deal included a widely discussed revenue-sharing mechanism tied to ambitious growth benchmarks. Players would gain access to a 50% share of incremental revenue only if the league surpassed a predefined financial threshold. That benchmark was calculated from 2019 revenue figures and required compounding growth of 20% year over year. For several seasons, achieving that pace appeared mathematically unrealistic. The league fell short repeatedly, citing pandemic disruptions, marketing challenges, and broadcast limitations. Financial observers quietly concluded that the clause functioned more as an aspirational incentive than an attainable payout trigger. Then, seemingly overnight, the economic landscape shifted. A dramatic influx of fan interest, ticket sales, media coverage, and merchandise demand altered projections in ways few analysts had anticipated. What once appeared to be an unreachable benchmark suddenly moved within striking distance. Now the union points to the activated revenue-sharing clause as proof of strategic foresight and collective power, while skeptics frame it as the byproduct of an extraordinary, singular market event. As the league celebrates its breakthrough, a larger question lingers beneath the applause. Was this financial milestone the result of long-term structural progress, or the spark of one transformative moment that reshaped
is upon us. The WNBA generated enough revenue in 2025 to trigger revenue sharing with players for the first time
across the league's entire 28-year existence. The WNBA has officially crossed a financial line that once felt almost unreachable. In 2025, the organization generated enough top-line revenue to activate its long-awaited revenue-sharing mechanism. That trigger unlocked an $8 million pool, a historic and unprecedented sum, now set to be distributed among players across all 13 active rosters. The Players Association wasted no time turning the moment into a statement. Social media lit up with celebration, champagne bottles popping, bold captions flying, and a unified message echoing across timelines. This payout validates the players' impact. They are pointing to this milestone as concrete leverage in advance of the 2026 collective bargaining negotiations, where they are pushing firmly and increasingly forcefully for a 27.5% share of gross league revenue. Their message to ownership is direct and unapologetic. The numbers prove our worth, the benchmarks have been met, and it's time for a larger piece of the financial pie. Yet that $8 million headline figure represents only a visible slice of a much broader economic shift happening largely out of public view. Behind the scenes, an even more revealing story is unfolding within group licensing revenue, the engine that powers merchandise, jersey sales, officially licensed apparel, trading cards, collectibles, and video game likeness rights. Historically, WNBA group licensing payouts have been strikingly modest, so low that critics often describe them as symbolic rather than substantial. But over the past year, the data shows a surge so dramatic it challenges every prior assumption about the league's commercial ceiling. Licensing income has skyrocketed at a pace rarely seen in professional sports marketing. The raw figures are staggering. And yet, buried beneath that explosive growth is a complicated and uncomfortable reality about how that money is allocated, who benefits most, and what those rapidly increasing checks truly signify for the
quick. From 2016 to 2019, they dispersed $280,000. Nobody was buying jerseys, trading cards, merchandise, none at all, none whatsoever. Then from 2020 to 2025, now we're splitting up.
From 2016 through 2019, across a full 4-year stretch, the entire Players Association distributed just $280,000 in total group licensing revenue. Think about that for a second. Over 4 straight seasons in a professional sports league, the marketplace response was so quiet that fans were barely purchasing anything at all. Jerseys weren't flying off the shelves. Trading cards weren't being collected in waves. Signature merchandise wasn't moving in meaningful volume. Consumer demand for WNBA products was, for all practical purposes, almost invisible. Fast forward to today, and the union is now announcing that it will divide a staggering $9.25 million in licensing revenue among its members. That represents an unheard of, almost unimaginable 3,200% surge in merchandise income. Even more remarkable, the overwhelming bulk of that $9 million windfall was produced in just the last calendar year alone. The spike wasn't gradual. It was explosive. But here's the hard reality that union executives are far less eager to spotlight publicly. That $9.25 million did not materialize because fans across the country suddenly rushed out to purchase jerseys for bench forwards in Los Angeles or backup guards in Seattle. It wasn't driven by a balanced wave of demand for every name on every roster. The surge was fueled overwhelmingly by one phenomenon: the tidal wave of Caitlyn Clark jerseys, Caitlyn Clark Panini trading cards, and Caitlyn Clark licensed apparel that flooded the market. And yet, due to the highly structured and deeply collective nature of the union's group licensing agreement, those earnings don't go exclusively to the individual who generated the sales. Instead, they are pooled and distributed across the membership. As union leader Nneka Agwamike has explained, this model reflects a deliberate and strategic approach to shared prosperity, one designed to lift the bottom of the roster just as much as the top, even if it means redistributing revenue generated
expenses. Quote, "We've grown as a union and put our name, image, and likeness into a collective package." Nneka Agwamike says, "The union exists for us to be able to represent all players, so I think it's a great way for all players to be able to share."
We bundled our name, image, and likeness into one collective licensing deal. It's being praised as unity, but in practice it looks like a redistribution system operating inside an aggressively capitalist sports marketplace. The Players Association intentionally structures these agreements so that the enormous profits created by one transformational superstar are pooled together and then divided evenly among the entire membership. That means the revenue generated by a single breakout phenomenon doesn't stay aligned with the source. It gets absorbed into a shared fund. Right now, that pool reportedly sits around $9 million, and it's expected to be split among more than 250 individuals. That number doesn't just represent the athletes who suited up during the 2025 season. It also includes players who have already retired and others who were waived and are no longer under active contract. Pause and really think about that structure. Former players who are no longer competing in the league could receive checks approaching $50,000. Not because of anything they did this year, but because fans across markets like Iowa and Indiana rushed to buy the number 22 jersey of a rookie sensation. The union frames this as shared growth, a collective rising tide lifting every boat. From their perspective, it's solidarity in action. But critics argue that in the unforgiving economics of professional sports, this model disconnects revenue from production. They claim it effectively redistributes earnings from the one athlete driving unprecedented merchandise demand to hundreds who, on their own, might not generate measurable retail impact. That tension between individual star power and collective compensation is fueling expectations of a serious labor clash in 2026. Negotiations are looming, and both sides appear entrenched. Union leadership is expected to point to the $8 million revenue-sharing trigger and the $9 million licensing pool as proof that the league's valuation has surged. They'll argue that new benchmarks validate a restructured financial system. Ownership groups, however, rely less on headlines and more on granular data. They analyze transaction-level metrics, conversion rates, and localized sales spikes. They know precisely which athlete moved product and by what multiplier. And when it comes to ownership perspective, few voices carry more weight than Joe Tsai, billionaire co-founder of Alibaba and principal owner of the New York Liberty. He's built a global empire on interpreting consumer data and scaling profitable ecosystems. When a microphone caught him referencing the measurable impact one rookie had on league economics, it underscored the widening gap between narrative and numbers. If both sides continue reading the same revenue surge through completely different lenses, the path toward a lockout becomes less hypothetical.
In effect on the WNBA, all the metrics went up. So this was last season, right, when she first came into the league from college. And we've seen all of our metrics from viewership.
Here's your rewritten script with the same tone, structure, and comparable length. In reality, across the WNBA, every measurable indicator surged. This was during her rookie season when she entered the league straight out of college, and the data was undeniable. Television ratings climbed. Arena attendance exploded. Corporate partnerships multiplied. Merchandise flew off the shelves. Nearly every meaningful business metric didn't just rise. It skyrocketed close to 4 times its previous level. Pause and really absorb that number. For times, when an owner with billions in assets publicly confirms, using the league's own internal analytics, that one athlete's arrival effectively quadrupled the economic footprint of the organization in a matter of months, that statement is not casual praise. It is calculated positioning. It is strategic leverage. When a power broker openly attributes a 400% surge to one player, he is not simply applauding talent. He is reframing the entire labor negotiation landscape. The players' union is asking for 27.5% of gross revenue, arguing that the league is experiencing historic collective expansion. But ownership can counter with a far more surgical argument. The foundational product did not suddenly transform. The teams are the same. The structure is the same. The pre-existing market value of the league, absent the phenomenon, remains relatively stable. From their perspective, perhaps only a fraction of the current revenue reflects baseline operations. The dramatic multiplier, the surge that unlocked multimillion-dollar bonuses and sponsorship windfalls, may be tied overwhelmingly to a singular generational draw. And here is where negotiations become ruthless. Owners will gladly distribute short-term licensing windfalls and celebrate headline revenue numbers. Temporary checks? Fine. Triggered incentives? Acceptable. But embedding long-term structural financial commitments into a new collective bargaining agreement based on what they view as a volatile, personality-driven spike. That is a fundamentally different equation. Billion-dollar enterprises do not permanently restructure cost frameworks around what they consider a variable asset. The irony unfolding behind the scenes is almost cinematic. Many veteran players who publicly downplayed her influence, who questioned the media frenzy, who emphasized respect for legacy contributors, who physically tested her on the court, are now participants in the very economic surge they once minimized. Licensing pools swell. Jersey sales soar. Revenue distributions expand. Whether they embrace the spotlight or resent it, the financial ecosystem it created benefits them all. This sets up a high-stakes collision course. The union views the cash influx as proof of collective momentum. Ownership may view it as concentrated star power temporarily inflating enterprise value. When the current CBA window closes, one side will argue for compensation tied to unprecedented growth. The other may argue that sustainable valuation must be separated from superstar volatility. So what is the correct framework? Is pooled licensing revenue a smart protection mechanism that ensures stability for every athlete in the league? Or does it dilute the economic power of the singular star who disproportionately drives demand? And if internal data truly confirms a 4x spike linked to one arrival, does that weaken the argument that growth is broadly systemic? These are not emotional questions. They are structural, financial, and strategic. If you want serious analysis about leverage, revenue allocation, and the hard math behind professional sports negotiations, not surface-level narratives,